When my wife passed away on a Tuesday morning in late April, I thought the hardest part was already behind me. I was wrong. The hardest part came 4 days later, sitting at a solicitor's table in Brisbane, watching my son's face change from grief to calculation in the span of about 30 seconds. Margaret Thornton, the solicitor, read my wife Dorothy's will in a voice that never once wavered. To our son, Callum Whitfield, she left the family home in Fig Tree Pocket, 4 bedrooms, double garage, riverfront position, valued at $2.1 million. She also left him the investment portfolio she'd built over 30 years, current value $1.4 million, and the superannuation accounts she'd been feeding since her first engineering job in 1987. Callum sat across from me with his wife, Renee. They were both leaning slightly forward. I recognized that posture. I'd seen it at auction houses, at parent-teacher nights when Callum was pushing for something. It meant he'd already done the maths. Then Margaret turned the page. To my husband, Robert Whitfield. She read, I leave the property located at 17 Barker's Ridge Road, Kilcoy, Queensland. The property consists of the main dwelling, 2 outbuildings, and 43 acres of land. Council valuation, $195,000. Callum blinked. He looked at me. Then he looked at the solicitor. A property in Kilcoy, he said. That's out past Esk. That's nowhere. Margaret's expression didn't shift. Your mother's instructions are clear. He almost laughed. Dad's 67 years old. He's a retired science teacher. What's he going to do with 43 acres in the middle of the bush? I hadn't said a word since Margaret started reading. I was staring at the folder in her hands, trying to understand why Dorothy had done this. She'd never mentioned Kilcoy, not once in 41 years of marriage. We'd talked about retiring to the Sunshine Coast, maybe Noosa. We'd talked about traveling. She'd never said a word about a property in Kilcoy. Margaret slid an envelope across the table toward me. Your wife left this for you, she said. She asked that you open it at the property. The envelope was cream-colored. Dorothy's handwriting on the front. Rob, open this at the house. Trust me. I picked it up. My hands were steadier than I expected. Callum stood. He buttoned his jacket with short, quick movements. This can't be right. She had $3 million in assets, and she left Dad a rundown shack in the bush? He looked at me. Did you know about this? I didn't. He shook his head. I'm calling our solicitor this afternoon. Margaret spoke calmly. That's your right. But I should tell you, Mrs. Whitfield had been working with our firm for 22 months. This will is ironclad. Contesting it will cost you significantly and result in exactly the same outcome. Callum grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. Outside, I could hear Renee talking to him in a low voice, the way she always did when she was trying to smooth something over. I sat for a moment longer at the table, holding the envelope. Margaret looked at me with something that wasn't quite sympathy but was close to it. She was very deliberate, she said. Your wife. About all of it. I know, I said. I just don't know why yet. She handed me a key. Old style, heavy brass. This opens the main house. Address is on the deed I've prepared for you. I took the key. Outside, Brisbane was going about its business. Traffic on the street. A delivery truck reversing somewhere. I stood on the footpath for a moment and looked at the key in my palm. This old heavy thing that didn't belong to any door I'd ever opened. What did you leave me, Dot? I said, quietly, to nobody. Then I walked to my car. The next morning, Callum came to the house. To what had been our house. Dorothy's house. Now legally his. I was in the second bedroom, the one we'd used as a study, sorting through the books I wanted to take. He knocked once and opened the door without waiting. He had a folder under his arm. I need you to be out by the 25th, he said. That's 3 weeks. Renee and I want to start the renovations before the end of May. 3 weeks? He put the folder on the desk. I've also spoken to a financial advisor. Given your age and your pension situation, he thinks it makes sense for you to have someone helping manage your affairs. He opened the folder. This is a power of attorney. Standard document. It means I can handle your banking, your property decisions, your medical. I read the page he'd turned to. The words, enduring power of attorney. All financial and property decisions, including parcels of land held in trust or otherwise. I looked at my son, the property in Kilcoy. It's just easier if I handle it. He said it the way he said everything these days, like he was explaining something obvious to someone slow. You've never dealt with rural property. You don't know what the rates are, what the compliance requirements are. I do. I can sort all of this out for you. I closed the folder and pushed it back across the desk. I'll think about it. He looked at me for a moment. Then he left. I sat down in the chair where Dorothy used to mark her structural reports, red pen in hand, glasses pushed up on her forehead. I looked at the folder. Then I looked at the key sitting on the corner of the desk. She'd said, "Trust me." I picked up the key. 2 days later, I finished boxing up my books and drove northwest on the Daguilar Highway. The city peeled away behind me, suburbs giving way to timber country, state forest, cattle properties. The land opened up and the sky got bigger. I passed through Woodford and kept going. At Kilcoy, I stopped for fuel and asked the man at the servo if he knew Barker's Ridge Road. He pointed west. About 12 Ks, he said. You, looking at that old Caldwell place? I said I supposed I was. He nodded slowly. Good land out there. Lot of people don't know it. I turned onto the road he'd pointed to. Gravel. Trees. Close on both sides. After a few kilometers, the canopy opened, and I saw it a timber homestead set back from a line of old silky oaks. The timber gray and weathered. The tin roof showing patches of rust along the ridgeline. The veranda sagging slightly on the left side. Behind the house, a large shed with one door hanging loose. Beyond that, the land stretched in rolling hills covered in native grass and scattered eucalyptus, going on further than I could see from the road. I pulled up in the dirt yard and sat in the car for a minute. Callum had said it was a wreck. Looking at it, I couldn't argue. The gutters were pulling away from the fascia on the eastern side. The front steps were going soft. A feral cat watched me from under the veranda and then disappeared. But the land, 43 acres of it, rolling away in every direction, and it was quiet in a way that Brisbane hadn't been for 40 years. No traffic, no development noise, just wind through the grass and a pair of wedge-tailed eagles turning slow circles over the ridge to the south. I got out and walked to the front door. The brass key fit the lock. The door swung open with the particular sound that old timber doors make. Dry hinges, a slight resistance, then giving. Inside, a single large room, kitchen and living combined. A hallway leading to 2 bedrooms. Furniture covered in old sheets. Dust on every surface. The smell of dry timber and something older underneath it. Something that made me think of the beach houses my parents had rented when I was small. On the kitchen table sat 2 envelopes, my name on both of them. Dorothy's handwriting. I sat down at the table, and I looked at them for a while without touching them. Outside, the eagles were still circling. "Okay, Dot," I said. I picked up the first one. Inside was a single page. Her handwriting. The firm looped script she'd had since university. "Rob, by the time you read this, you've already found the house. I need you to do something before you open the second envelope. Go to the shed, far left corner, behind the old fertilizer bags. There's a metal box. The key in your hand opens it. Everything I need to tell you is in there. The house is yours, the land is yours, and you are safer than you know. I love you. Always have. Dot. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully, put it in my shirt pocket, and went to the shed. The fertilizer bags were stacked against the far wall, half a dozen of them, stiff with age. I moved them aside. Behind them, bolted to the wall with 2 brackets, was a steel document box, matte gray, the kind surveyors use on site. The brass key fit the lock. Inside were 4 manila folders, each one labeled in Dorothy's handwriting. Red tab, Callum. Financial records. Blue tab, Callum and Harrison, evidence. Green tab, property and trust documents. Yellow tab, what to do next. On top of the folders was a sealed envelope. My name on the front. My hands were steady when I broke the seal. I don't know why. Everything in my body should have been shaking. But I just sat on an overturned bucket in that shed and read what my wife had written me. Rob, she wrote, I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you this while I was still here. Some things are safer written than spoken. And I needed you to be here, at this place, before you knew 3 things. First, Callum has been taking money from us for the past 2 years. He forged my signature on authorization forms to access our joint investment account. He redirected funds through a company structure he set up with his business partner. Total amount, $340,000. The red folder has everything: bank statements, the forged forms, transfer records. I found it in August 2022, 8 months before I passed. I didn't confront him. I documented it instead. Second, Callum has been working with a property developer named Harrison Doyle since early 2022. The plan, and I have their emails and messages in the blue folder, is to have you declared incapable of managing your own affairs. Transfer control of this property to Callum as your legal administrator, and sell the land to Doyle's company for a residential subdivision. The council has been reviewing this corridor for rezoning. If it goes through, this land is worth between $8 and $12 million. They know that. That's why they want it. Third, this land is protected. I placed it in an irrevocable trust 18 months ago. Your name only. No power of attorney. No guardianship order. No creditor can touch it. The trust documents are in the green folder. I also made sure the trust includes a clause read Section 38B, that if Callum takes any legal action against you or this property, or participates in any transaction with Harrison Doyle or his related entities, he forfeits everything. I left him, and the financial evidence goes directly to the Queensland Police Fraud Unit. I've also made arrangements for the property. Read the yellow folder when you're ready. I love you more than I ever knew how to say. You were a good husband, a patient man, and a far better father than our son deserved. Trust this place, Rob. It's been waiting for you. I sat in the shed for a long time after that. Outside, the wind moved through the grass on the ridge. A currawong called somewhere in the silky oaks. The wedge-tailed eagles had drifted further north. Sanshasiwan Mayun. While his mother was in treatment, while I was driving her to the cancer center in Brisbane 3 times a week, while she was losing weight and struggling to sleep and fighting to stay alive, he was forging her signature. I opened the red folder. Dorothy's handwriting on the first page. A timeline. March 2022. $60,000 withdrawn from Fidelity Joint Investment Account. Authorization form. Submitted with forged signature. Funds transferred to Doyle Capital Pty Limited, ACN 634. I noted the number Callum listed as director. June 2022. $95,000 withdrawn. Same account. Same method. Security footage from the bank shows Callum at the branch at 2:14 p.m. on the date of submission. September 2022. $120,000 withdrawn from my personal account at ANZ. Callum listed as authorized signatory on fraudulent hardship documentation. January 2023, $65,000. Electronic transfer. IP address traced to Callum's work computer. Total. 340. 0. Beneath the timeline, photocopies. Bank statements with yellowed highlighting. The authorization forms with Dorothy's signature close but not right. The loop's too large. The angle wrong. I knew her handwriting like I knew my own. At the bottom of the folder, a sticky note in Dorothy's hand. Discovered this August 12, 2022. Monitored for 6 months before I moved the property into trust. Did not confront him. He believes he was never caught. I closed the folder. I stood up too fast and had to put a hand on the shelf beside me. Callum had stolen from his mother while she was dying. While she was too sick to check the statements herself. He'd used the chaos of her illness like a tool. I walked outside into the afternoon light. The grass on the ridge was moving in long, slow waves. The shed door swung gently behind me. "You're not my son," I said out loud, to no one. Then I went inside, put the kettle on with the bottle of water I'd brought from Brisbane, and opened the blue folder. The blue folder was worse. Harrison Doyle. The first page read in Dorothy's careful summary. Developer, Gold Coast and Southeast Queensland. Company, Doyle Capital, Pty Limited. History, 3 successful residential subdivisions, 2018, 2021. Currently pursuing rezoning approvals in the Daguilar corridor, including land parcels in the Kilcoy area. She'd written a note at the bottom of the page. He approached Callum at a property industry dinner in March 2022. Callum came home talking about a business connection he'd made. I didn't know then what it meant. The next page was a printed email chain. Doyle to Callum, March 19th, 2022. Council rezoning is 2 to 3 years away, but when it goes through, those parcels will be worth 8 to 12 million on the residential market. I'd like to talk about a pathway to acquisition. Coffee Thursday? Callum's reply. Same day. Harrison, yes. Interested. Parents don't know the value. Let's talk. Dorothy had circled parents don't know the value and written in the margin. He knew before I did. I kept reading. Messages. Printed on 6 pages. October 2022. Doyle to Callum. Need the land in your control before the rezoning comes through. What's the timeline on your father? Callum. Working on it. Mum's not going to last past Easter. Once she's gone, I start the process. Maybe 2 to 3 months after the funeral before things settle enough. Doyle. Make it faster. I've got investors waiting. January 2023. Doyle. What's the holdup? Callum. Dad's not as easy as I thought. He's going to need a legal mechanism. Talking to a solicitor about guardianship options. Old man. Recently widowed. Living alone. Retired. Shouldn't be hard to argue diminished capacity. Doyle. Good. Once you have authority over the property, we proceed immediately. Contracts ready. I put the folder down. He'd used his mother's death as a scheduling item. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The light outside shifted. The wedge-tails came back. I watched them through the window without seeing them. Then my phone rang. Brisbane number. Callum. I almost didn't answer. Then something made me pick up and press mute before I said anything. Old habit. The kind teachers develop. He was already talking. Sounded like he was in a car. Yeah, I know, he said, voice impatient. He's out there now, I think. He drove up yesterday, probably. The old man, he'll be confused. That property's a mess. He'll be ready to sell within the week, just from the state of the place alone. A pause. Someone responding on the other end. The guardianship application's ready, Callum said. My solicitor says we file Monday if he doesn't sign the POA by Friday. Once we have that, the property transfers to me as administrator, and we proceed. Harrison's people can be on site within 30 days of settlement. Another pause. No, he doesn't know anything. Mum kept all of this completely separate from him. He's a retired teacher, Harrison. He taught year 10, science for 35 years. He doesn't know what he's sitting on. The call ended. I sat in the quiet kitchen with the phone in my hand. My heart was going hard. The kind of rhythm I hadn't felt since I was playing cricket in my 40s. Year 10 science. He doesn't know what he's sitting on. I opened my phone's voice recorder, found the call had been recorded automatically through the app I'd set up months ago when the anonymous phone calls had started. Calls I'd suspected were connected to Callum's friends. Calls at odd hours where nobody spoke. I'd set the recorder running and forgotten about it. The call was there. Clear. I saved it to the cloud. Labeled it. Then, I opened the yellow folder. Dorothy's handwriting again. 6 pages this time. Rob, if you've read the red and blue folders, I know you're hurting. I know you probably feel like the world you thought you were standing on has dissolved. I felt that way too. Sitting at the kitchen table in August 2022, with those bank statements in front of me, realizing what our son had done. Here's what I did about it. Page 2. The property is protected. Irrevocable trust. Your name only. Callum cannot acquire it through guardianship, POA, or any legal mechanism he knows about. Section 38B of the trust document names Harrison Doyle and Doyle Capital Pty Limited explicitly. Any transaction involving them or their related entities triggers automatic forfeiture of Callum's entire inheritance. Page 3. The land. I had it assessed independently in September 2022 by a firm in Gympie. I didn't use Brisbane firms because I didn't want the results getting back to Doyle. The assessment is in the green folder. 43 acres, with current rural residential zoning. If the D'Aguilar corridor rezoning proceeds as projected, and the council planning documents I obtained through a Freedom of Information request suggest it will, this land will be valued between $8 and $12 million within 3 to 4 years. Doyle knew this. Callum found out from him. You are sitting on it. I had to put the folder down. $8 to $12 million. I picked it up again. Page 4. I've made arrangements for the property in the meantime. I've set up a lease agreement with a cattle farmer named Gary Sutton, who runs beef cattle on the 3 properties adjoining yours to the north. He's been leasing the grazing rights informally for years. The previous owners had an arrangement with him. I've formalized it. He'll pay you $28,000 a year in lease income, more than enough to cover the rates, the maintenance, and give you something to live on while you decide what to do next. Page 5. Trust. 2 people. Margaret Thornton, you know her. She was at the reading. And Gary Sutton. I asked Gary to keep an eye on the place and to introduce himself when you arrived. He's a good man. He lost his wife 6 years ago. He knows what it is to go on. Page 6. And this was the one that put me face down on the kitchen table for a while. Rob, I know this isn't what we planned. We talked about Noosa, about traveling, about you finally reading all those history books you bought and never opened. I'm sorry it's this instead. But I need you to understand something. I'm not leaving you a problem. I'm leaving you protection. Callum would have taken everything from you eventually. Not just the money, your independence, your dignity, your ability to make your own decisions. I saw what he was becoming long before this. I didn't want to. Parents never do. This land gives you something he cannot reach. That's why I put it in your name. That's why I built the walls I built. When you're ready, read the green folder. All of it. Then call Margaret. One more thing. The second envelope on the kitchen table, the sealed one. Open that last. Not yet. I love you, Rob. 41 years. Wasn't long enough. Yours always, Dot. I sat at the table until the light outside went gold and then orange, and then the purple dark of a Queensland bush evening. I hadn't eaten. I'd forgotten about it entirely. Eventually, I heard a truck coming up the road. Headlights swept across the kitchen window. Boots on the veranda steps. A knock. I opened the door. A man in his late 60s, my age, give or take. Broad through the shoulders. Sun-damaged face. Wearing a flannel shirt and carrying a paper bag. He had the look of someone who spent most of his time outdoors and had stopped worrying about what indoor spaces thought of him. "Gary Sutton," he said. "I run cattle on the next block over. Dorothy asked me to check in on you." He held up the bag, brought a meat pie and some lamingtons from the bakery in town. "You would have forgotten to eat." I almost said something and then couldn't. He seemed to understand. He just walked past me into the kitchen, put the bag on the table, and filled the electric kettle from the drum of water he'd apparently noticed in the back of my car when he drove in. "There's no mains water connected yet," he said. "I'll sort that out this week. Generator's in the shed. I'll show you how to start it in the morning." He looked at the folders on the table without asking about them. "Dorothy was thorough," he said, simply. "She was," I said. He pulled out a chair and sat down. "Eat," he said. "Then you can tell me what you found in those folders if you want, or you don't have to. Either way, you shouldn't sit alone in an unlit kitchen in the bush on your first night here." I ate the meat pie. It was still warm. I told him most of it. Gary didn't interrupt much. He asked 2 or 3 precise questions. At the end, he looked at the steel box and then at me. "Callum and Doyle have been in town," he said. "At the council offices, at the surveyors. I know. They'll come here. Probably tomorrow or the day after." I nodded. Gary stood. "I'll be here at 7, he said. "You won't be talking to them alone." He put on his hat. "Dorothy told me what she thought you were," he said from the doorway. "Said you were steadier than you knew. She said most people fold when their world shifts. She said you weren't most people." He left. I sat in the kitchen with the lantern he'd left on the table, battery-powered, bright enough, and the folders and the 2 envelopes, one open, one still sealed. I was 67 years old, and I was starting my life over in a timber farmhouse with a leaking roof and 43 acres of land that might be worth $12 million, and a son I would never trust again. I picked up the sealed envelope. Not yet. That's what Dorothy had written. I put it back down. I lay on the camp stretcher I'd brought from Brisbane and listened to the bush outside. Frogs somewhere, an owl, wind in the silky oaks. I didn't sleep for a long time, but when I finally did, it was deep and still, and I didn't dream. They came the next morning. 2 cars, Callum in his Audi, and behind him, a white Range Rover with a Gold Coast number plate. I was on the veranda with Gary when they pulled into the yard. Callum got out. He was in a good suit, which seemed like a strange decision for a property he'd described as a wreck. The man who got out of the Range Rover was perhaps 50, heavy-set, moving with the casual certainty of someone who bought things for a living. "Dad," Callum said. "Go ahead," I said. He looked at Gary again. Gary didn't move. Callum cleared his throat. "This is Harrison Doyle," he said. "He's a developer. He's made a very fair offer on the property." Doyle stepped forward and extended his hand. I didn't take it. "Mr. Whitfield," he said, smiling. "I understand this place isn't exactly what you were hoping for from the estate. You're in your late 60s. You've just lost your wife. You've got a property that needs significant money spent on it before it's livable. I'd like to make that problem go away. I'm prepared to offer you $900,000. Cash settlement in 30 days. You walk away clean." $900,000, I said. "For land that's worth $12 million when the rezoning comes through." The smile held, but something behind it went still. Callum stepped forward. Dad, you don't know what you're talking about. There's no guarantee of rezoning. This is speculation, not. You were on the phone 2 nights ago, I said. I heard you. Guardianship application ready to file Monday. Harrison's people on site within 30 days of settlement. The old man taught Year 10 science. He doesn't know what he's sitting on. Callum went white. I pulled out my phone. I played 15 seconds of the recording. Callum's voice came out of the speaker, clear as rain. Harrison's people can be on site within 30 days of settlement. I stopped it. Doyle looked at Callum. You said this was handled. Callum said nothing. I looked at my son. I had expected, somewhere in the back of my mind, that I would feel something here. The small hope that there was still something of the boy I'd known. The one who'd sat on my shoulders at the cricket, who'd cried at the end of his dog's life, who'd called me every Sunday for the first 2 years he was at university. I looked for that boy now. I didn't find him. Tires on the gravel road. A white Corolla came up the drive. Margaret Thornton got out, briefcase in hand. Behind her, a woman in her 40s in a navy jacket I didn't recognize. Margaret walked directly to Doyle. Mr. Doyle, I represent the estate of Dorothy Whitfield and the interests of Robert Whitfield. I'm serving you with a cease and desist order, effective immediately. You are prohibited from contacting Mr. Whitfield, making offers on this property, or conducting any business relating to this land. Breach of this order will result in immediate legal action. Doyle looked at the document she handed him. On what basis? Margaret turned to a second page. Mrs. Whitfield established an irrevocable trust covering this property 18 months before her death. Section 38B of the trust explicitly names you and Doyle Capital Pty Limited as prohibited parties. Any transaction between Callum Whitfield and any entity you control triggers the forfeiture clause. Callum Whitfield loses his entire inheritance. The Fig Tree Pocket property, the investment portfolio, the superannuation, and the financial evidence of his embezzlement transfers automatically to the Queensland Police Fraud Unit. Doyle's face didn't change, but his hands, loose at his sides, curled very slightly. Margaret turned to Callum. The second document is for you. Callum took it without looking at her. He was looking at me. The woman in the navy jacket stepped forward. My name is Claire Ashby, she said. I'm a forensic accountant. Your mother engaged me in October 2022. I've been completing an independent audit of the fund movements from your joint accounts over the preceding 18 months. She looked at Callum. I've provided a full report to Margaret's office and a preliminary summary to the Queensland Police Financial Crimes Unit. Callum's jaw moved, but nothing came out. If the evidence is referred formally, Miss Ashby said, you're looking at charges under the Criminal Code Act for fraud and obtaining financial advantage by deception. The amounts involved and the method of execution repeated, documented, deliberate, would likely result in a custodial sentence. Doyle looked at Callum. He looked at him for a long, cold moment. Then he walked back to the Range Rover, got in, and drove away down the gravel road without another word. Callum stood in the yard holding his documents. He looked at Gary, who had not moved or spoken during any of this. He looked at Margaret. He looked at the house. He looked at me. His mouth opened. For a moment I thought he was going to say something real, something that sounded like the person I'd thought I was raising. His eyes had a quality I hadn't seen in them for years. Then it closed again. He walked to his car. He sat in it for a moment, staring through the windscreen at the homestead his mother had protected from him. Then he reversed out of the yard and drove away. Margaret came and stood beside me on the veranda. That's it? I said. For now. She'll need to consider his options. He has two choices: walk away and keep his inheritance, or fight and lose everything, including his freedom. Doyle's gone already, which tells you how this ends. She set a folder on the veranda railing. I'll leave this with you. It's an overview of the trust and the next steps for the property. Claire will be in touch about the audit. You don't have to make any decisions about anything today. She left. Gary went to put the kettle on, and I stood on the sagging veranda of a timber homestead in the Kilcoy Hills and looked out at 43 acres of land that a week ago I'd thought was the consolation prize. I went inside and picked up the sealed envelope. Open this last. I opened it. 3 pages. In Dorothy's handwriting. Rob, if you're reading this, you've done it. You stayed. You went to the shed. You read the folders. You met Gary. You held your ground. I knew you would. That's the thing you never believed about yourself that I always knew. I want to tell you something about this place. I found it in 2019. I was doing infrastructure consulting work for the council. You'll remember I was driving out that way for 6 months. The rezoning proposal was in its early stages, and I had access to the corridor assessments. I saw the land. I made some inquiries. I put in an offer through a shelf company in my maiden name. I didn't tell you. I know I should have, but I wanted to be sure first. And then I got sick, and sure became urgent. This land is your future, Rob. Not because of what it's worth, though it is worth a great deal, and that will matter, but because it's yours in a way that nothing else can be touched. I made it safe for you. I spent 2 years making it safe. The lease income from Gary will cover your costs for years. When the rezoning comes through, and it will, my assessment is late 2026 or 2027, you'll have choices. You could sell. You could develop it yourself, modestly, on your own terms. Or you could simply hold it and let the value grow while you do whatever you like. What I'd like you to do, and this is a suggestion, not an instruction, because you are a sensible man who never needed my instructions, is this: stay a while. Let Gary show you the land. Read the history books. Watch the eagles. Let yourself be somewhere quiet for the first time in 40 years. You spent your career teaching children about the world. You gave them everything you had. Now give some of it to yourself. The second thing, when you're ready, think about doing something with a small portion of what this land provides. There are young people in this region who don't have access to the things city kids take for granted. There are families going through what we went through with my illness, and they can't afford what we could barely afford. You know better than anyone what a bit of support at the right moment does for a life. You were a good teacher because you understood that, Rob. Don't stop understanding it just because the classroom is behind you. I love you. Take care of yourself. Eat properly. Get outside every day. And please, finally read those history books. Yours, Dot. I sat with that letter for a long time. Outside, Gary was whistling something tuneless while he started the generator. The lights in the kitchen flickered on. Through the window, the land stretched away south and west under a sky that was going the particular deep blue of a Queensland afternoon. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in the steel box with the others. Then I stood up, walked outside, and said to Gary, "Will you show me the land?" He looked at me. "Thought you'd never ask." We walked for 2 hours. He showed me the creek line at the southern boundary, the old stock trail along the ridge, the place where the silky oaks gave way to a stand of spotted gum that he said had been there for 200 years. He told me what the grass carried in a good season, how the land had been managed before the previous owners, what it needed. We sat on the ridge as the sun went down and watched the lights come on in the valley below. "It's a good place," Gary said. I nodded. "Dorothy thought so." He looked out at the view. "She came out here a few times, you know. Walked the land herself. Stood right about here." He paused. "She said it reminded her of the country she grew up in. Settled her." She never told me. No. He was quiet for a moment. She was protecting it. Sometimes you don't tell people about the things you're protecting. Not until you're sure. The stars came out over the ridge. The derricks were elsewhere. This wasn't oil country. This was cattle country, red soil country. Country that asked you to be patient and to pay attention and to take the long view. I could do that. 6 weeks later, Callum's solicitor called Margaret to inform her that Callum would not be contesting the will or pursuing any legal action regarding the property. He was keeping his inheritance, the Brisbane house, the investments, and he was making no further contact. Margaret forwarded the email to me without comment. I read it once and put my phone down. That evening I walked out to the southern boundary fence, where the creek ran low and brown in the late autumn. I had Gary's dog with me, a red kelpie named Brick, who had adopted me without ceremony about 2 weeks in, and now slept outside my bedroom door. I thought about what Dorothy had written. The best thing you can do when someone tries to take everything from you is build something so good that their cruelty becomes irrelevant. She hadn't written that exactly, but it was what she'd meant. 2 years later, the Dagular Corridor rezoning was approved by the Queensland government. The assessed value of the Barker's Ridge property went to $9.4 million in the first independent valuation. I didn't sell. I signed a development agreement with a local builder for 12 modest residential lots on the eastern section. Designed carefully, landscaped to preserve the ridge, with the western 30 acres retained in my name as permanent agricultural land. The lots were priced fairly, bought by families, teachers, nurses, tradies who wanted to be out of the city. The proceeds, after costs, came to $4.2 million. I kept $600,000 for myself, more than I needed, enough to live on for the rest of my life without worry. The remaining $3.6 million I put into a foundation, the Dorothy Ruth Whitfield Foundation. Dorothy's middle name was Ruth, the name she'd been called as a girl. 3 pillars. The first, bursaries for students in the Dagular region pursuing engineering, environmental science, and trades, the kinds of study Dorothy had done, the kinds of hands-on work she'd respected. $2,000 each, no strings attached except a letter at the end of the year telling the foundation what they'd learned. The second, emergency support for rural families facing serious illness, medical costs, transport to Brisbane for treatment, short-term accommodation, the things that fall through the cracks when you're sick and you're 2 hours from the city. The third, a community land trust, small parcels of the agricultural land retained at below-market lease rates for young farming families who couldn't afford to get started. Gary helped me design this one. He knew what it was to want land and not be able to reach it. At the first bursary evening, held at the community hall in Kilcoy, 18 young people came up to receive their envelopes. I stood at the front of the room and looked at them, some nervous, some grinning. One girl in the second row who was visibly trying not to cry. I said, "My wife Dorothy was a structural engineer. She left school from a small town not very different from this one. She did it on a scholarship she almost didn't apply for. If she hadn't applied, I don't know what either of our lives would have looked like. She spent the last 2 years of her life making sure I was protected and making sure this land could be used for something good. Tonight, is that something good? She would have been better at this speech than I am. She was better at most things. I didn't say anything else." We handed out the envelopes. Callum, last I heard from Margaret, was working in property management in Melbourne. Jessica had left him. The Fig Tree Pocket House was sold during a divorce proceeding. He'd spent his way through the investment portfolio inside 3 years. I didn't feel what I'd expected to feel, which was vindication. I felt something quieter than that. Something that was almost nothing, like the space where a sound used to be. Some people choose their path, and that choosing is all there is to say about them. I chose mine. On the second anniversary of Dorothy's passing, I planted a grevillea at the corner of the veranda, the Robin Gordon variety she'd had in every garden we'd ever had together. It took well. Gary said it liked the soil here. In spring, it flowered red and orange, and the oniators came from the creek line to drink from it every morning. I sat with my coffee and watched them, and thought about what I'd learned. Not from Callum, not from Doyle, from her. The first thing, loyalty to the people you love is not passive. It is something you build, carefully, over time, when nobody is watching, for the day it might be needed. The second, what a thing appears to be on the surface, and what it actually is, are often two very different things. A rundown farmhouse on 43 acres of scrub can hold a future that nobody standing in the yard can see. So can a person. The third, money reveals character rather than creating it. The people who tell you who they are when money enters the room believe them. The fourth, and this one took the longest to understand, forgiveness and justice are not the same thing, and you do not need the first to achieve the second. I did not forgive my son. I don't think I will. But I did not let what he did consume me. I built something instead. I let what she built guide me. And the fifth, which isn't really a lesson so much as a reminder, the people who love us most sometimes do their most important work in silence, in the years before the crisis, in the preparations we never see until we need them. Pay attention to the quiet. I'm 69 now. The eagles still circle the ridge in the afternoon. The kelpie is getting gray around the muzzle. Gary comes twice a week, and we walk the boundary fence and talk about the cattle and occasionally about our wives, who were both better than us and who both knew it. The land is still mine. It will be mine until I decide otherwise, and when I do decide otherwise, it will go somewhere good. Dorothy made me promise that, in her own way, without ever using those words. I'm keeping the promise. I always intended to.